So I am Mrs. Hamrick. We are super glad to see so many students participating in this presentation today. We are going to be talking about essays, resumes, and letters of recommendation. We do have a wonderful guest speaker who is here with us today, Rachel West, who is the Associate Director of Admissions from Agnes Scott College. So Rachel, thank you so much for being a part of our presentation. And we are gonna get started with her presentation first and let her talk about essays, and then I will pick up with resumes and letters of recommendation toward the end. So Rachel, I'm gonna turn it over to you and let you get started. We have a lot of information to cover. And let me say this, hold on. If you have a question, since we have a large amount of information to cover today, type the question into the chat and we will compile all of those questions and create an FAQ that we will post with the recording on the junior counseling page. But please put those questions in the chat and we will be happy to answer those. But we probably are not going to be able to do an unmute question session during this particular session. Okay, Rachel, we're excited to have you. So let us hear all about essays.
All right, thank you. And apologies if at any point I start to sound a little robotic. It just started raining very hard here, and the internet is trying to catch up with that. But as Jamie already said, my name is Rachel West. I hope that some of you have at least already heard of us, but I'm not going to be talking about Agnes Scott very much today. Instead, I'm going to be focusing in on my favorite part of the college admissions process, which is about navigating the college essay and talking about how you can make your college essay the best that it focus on a couple of different things. So number one, I want to talk about what college admissions offices are looking for out of admissions essays. I want to say this can be a little bit broader. So obviously different colleges look at essays in different ways. Essay isn't always for admission. Sometimes you're using it for scholarship purposes or things like that. So it's going to be a little bit broader in that sense. We're also going to talk about what makes a successful and unique essay and how you can make your essay stand out when there are so many applications that people are reading every year. What's going to make you memorable when admissions counselors are reading your essay? So, while we start talking about this, I want to just go ahead and say the reason why the essay is my favorite part of the application part. Now, again, I want to emphasize every school does look at essays differently. If you're applying to any very highly selective institutions, any liberal arts colleges, the essay is going to have a lot more university. That's just the way that it is a lot of times. However, the great thing about the essay is it's really the only place in the application process where you get to talk for yourself. Your transcript is already set. You've already taken those classes. You've already gotten those grades. Your letters of recommendation are other people talking about you. Your resume is going to be the activities you've already done. So this is your chance to actually talk to us, to tell us who you are, what your personality's like, why that would be a good fit on our campus, right? It's also new information for us. So there are going to be things about you that aren't going to be included in those other places. And we want to know about those things, especially if they're important to you. I already mentioned understanding how you fit in our college campus. Every place works with that a little bit differently. To give you an example of how I would use fit, we're looking for things like, are you going to fit in well with our student body, with our curriculum, global learning? If you write your entire essay on how you never want to leave the United States, maybe you're not such a great fit for Agnes Scott's curriculum, right? And then holistic review, a lot of colleges that use holistic review are going to focus really heavily on the essay piece. to us, and it's all considered when we're looking at that essay. Can be a really important deciding. All right, so moving forward, how do we consider the essay in the admission process? Again, I have to keep stressing, lots of places it's different. I'm going to talk from Agnes Scott's perspective and then give you a couple of little things to keep in mind. So number one, content versus grammar. When I am reading your essay, I am not going to take, points off. I am not looking for if you used every comma correctly. Now, this was very difficult for me in the beginning. I was an English major. You do not have to be an English major for your college essay to be great. All I'm looking for with grammar is, do you know the basics of grammar? Have you proofread your essay so there aren't typos or simple mistakes? And will your essay hold up in a first-year English class? Most colleges have some form of first-year English, writing, student success class that they're going to ask you to take. So we want to make sure that you're prepared for that class using the college essay. What is more important to us is the content. What story are you telling? What are you going to talk to us about? What can we learn from you from it? And keep in mind the basics of storytelling when you're thinking about writing your essay. Your story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It should have a thesis or a through line that carries all the way through it, and it should have a strong conclusion. Those are things that are very important in any story that you're telling, and that is also true of your college admission essay. So, excuse me. So as we move forward, I also want to talk a little bit about things that we see a lot of. So frequently, we see people trying to do 5-paragraph essays. This is what you're taught to do in many classes, and so I totally understand that. The 5-paragraph format may not be the best choice for your college essay. This is for a couple of reasons. This is a narrative essay rather than sort of an argumentative, and so 5 paragraphs is not always the best fit for that. It is also a shorter essay. So you have 650 words maximum if you're using the common application. I think it's also true for the coalition application. 650 words means 5 very short paragraphs. So do not feel constrained to the 5-paragraph essay. Your essay may be 3 paragraphs. It may be 6 very short paragraphs, depending on how you're structuring your essay. Don't feel like you have to stick to that 5-paragraph format. If your essay starts with "my name is blank," that is probably not a good sign. Generally, when an essay starts with something like, "My name is Rachel West and I attend Pope High School and I am a member of the cheerleading squad," it's setting us up for an essay telling us things we already know. I already mentioned this is your only place to talk for yourself. Don't tell us the information we already know about you, that we already know from your resume, from your transcript, from other places in your applications. So avoid that piece. The other thing I want to talk about is talking about difficult subjects. So a lot of times students have situations that have happened to them in the past that had really big effects on them. Those situations might be very difficult. They might be traumatic. They might be things that happen to you that are difficult for you to put down on paper. But because they had such a big impact on you, you want to write about them for your college essay. I am not going to tell you that you should not do that. What I will tell you is that sometimes if you're very emotional, if it's still a really emotional topic, it can be difficult to look at that objectively in terms of writing. And also, I would never, ever want anyone to re-traumatize themselves writing a college essay. It is not worth that. So write about difficult subjects if that's something that you can handle and you feel good about it. Otherwise, maybe think about something else. That's just my disclaimer. We can talk a little bit more about that if you have specific examples, or if you want to email me, my email is going to be later. We can also talk about it in that way. All right, so moving forward, I want to focus in a little bit on specifically some of the prompts and topics that are available. So I'm using the Common Application prompts for 2 reasons. 1, those are the prompts that Agnes Scott uses. We use the Common Application. And 2, the 7 prompts that are on the Common App are fairly similar to prompts that you will find on many other applications, scholarship applications, college applications, that sort of thing. They're also incredibly broad. So they're a good place to kind of talk about these sorts of topics. So I want to talk about the 7 different prompts, and I'm not going to break them all down, but what I am going to do is tell you what we see a lot of and good ways to do that prompt. So for example, the first Common App prompt, students that have a background, identity, interest, or talent that's so meaningful that they believe their application would be incomplete without it. Essentially, do you have something in your story, something about yourself that isn't covered anywhere else in the application? You can write about that. It's very broad. This is the reason why it's one of the most popular Common App essay prompts. It's one of our biggest responses. Bad ways to do this prompt. A, you tell us things that we already know. It's supposed to be that you believe your application would be incomplete without it, right? So we're looking for something that isn't already covered. B, you give us something that you just tell us about it without giving us any information about why it's important. So if you write about your interest in skateboarding, I had a great essay a couple of years ago with someone who wrote all about skateboarding and their history with it and things like that. But if you just write about why you like skateboarding and that's it, it doesn't tell me anything about you other than that you like to skateboard. You need to have a story that goes with that, something that ties to how it's important to your history, what you want to do with that moving forward. Remember that in every college essay, I want to walk away from that paper or from that essay knowing this is why this person should be admitted to my college. You don't have to say it explicitly. It doesn't need to be, and my love of skateboarding led to my love of physics, and that's what I want to do in college. There aren't always that sort of clear through line, but I need to walk away thinking about what your conclusion is. So you can do that in a lot of ways, but really focus in on making sure that you're telling that story and giving that reason of why we would want you to be admitted. The second prompt I would say is also very broad, and we get a lot of them. So it is the obstacles essay. And this is something that you're going to see a lot on college applications and scholarships applications. Recount a time you faced a challenge, a setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn? Prompts that we get, or essays that we get a lot from this. This is a very common one for what I call the athletics essay. This is not against any of my athletes that are in here. It just so happens that a lot of times there are essays that go something like, I am on the soccer/football/ultimate frisbee team, and we went to insert big game here, and we faced this insurmountable challenge, which we won/lost, and it taught me the value of teamwork, perseverance, hard work, whatever you want to plug in there. I have seen probably 300 versions of that essay just this year. So it doesn't stand out particularly. Things to keep in mind when you are writing about this essay. You want to talk about what the challenge, setback, or failure was. You want to talk about how it affected you personally. And you want to really hit in on that, what you learned from the experience. The other thing we get a lot of with this one is from that straight A student. I know you're in here. You've always gotten A's your entire life, but you made a B one time. And you have to write about that B one time. Again, it doesn't help if you don't write about what you learned from the experience. So really focus in on that point, talking about, here's where I was before I encountered this setback. Here's what I did to overcome it. Here's what I learned and why that makes me a good fit for your college. So just keep in mind that you want to hit all of those points in your story. All right, so the third prompt, again, I would say a little less common in terms of what people go with. Reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? This one, I would say not as common. The thing about this one is you really want to make sure that you have a full story that you can tell, because this one is usually very internal. So it's going to be the thoughts and feelings that you had surrounding an issue. And that can be difficult to write about. It can be really difficult to write about your internal feelings in a way that makes sort of sense for other people to read. A lot of times essays that we get on this topic are people challenging their family's beliefs about religion or culture or societal norms. It's totally fine to write about those. But again, I think the important thing that you can do with this is, what was the belief or idea? Why did you start to question or challenge it? What led you to start to think about it? Was there an inciting incident? Did you do research? Whatever it was. What was the process through which you thought through that issue? Where do you stand now? And how did that help you? Okay, make sure you are hitting all of those points. Otherwise, the essay kind of falls a little bit flat. There are creative ways to do this one. An example that I had, one of my favorite essays from last year, a student who was a fantastic literature student, but couldn't understand Flannery O'Connor. She was like, everyone loves Flannery O'Connor. My English teacher says she's one of the best. I just don't get it. And then she went through her internal thought process. She went through the research she'd done. And then at the end, she still really didn't get Flannery O'Connor and why she was such a huge star in the literature world. But she had a clearly articulated argument that came out at the end. It was one of the most creative ways I've seen this prompt addressed. So just think about some of those things, ways that you could take this prompt in a different direction. So prompt number 4 is actually new. So this is going to be new for next year. Reflect on something that someone has done that made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected you or motivated you? So I don't have a ton of data yet, since it's new, on what are going to be our most common essay responses to this. I could make some guesses, and I'm going to guess that this is going to be a family motivated essay. So a lot of people are going to be writing about that time their mom, their dad, their brother, their grandmother, whatever it is, did something that made them really happy, that sort of thing. So I think actually there's some really great opportunities with this prompt. Because of that last question, how has that gratitude affected or motivated you? I think there are going to be some really interesting and creative ways that you could take this. So if you're thinking about these prompts and thinking about what you might write about, as you're brainstorming, think about some things that have happened to you in the past, things that you were very happy for, that other people did for you. Think about, both family, but also friends, teachers, summer camp counselors, whatever it is. And think about how that connects to who you are now. Did it motivate you to become a better student? Did it motivate you to really become interested in social justice? And here's how you do that. Did it motivate you to become really interested in biochemistry because you want to do research in this specific field to help this person? Think about those sorts of links that can also work as that why I want to admit you piece. I'm excited to see where people take this one. And I think it is going to be a good opportunity for you. So think about this prompt as a possibility. So the 5th prompt, the thing about this prompt is it's very much like the first one. There's a lot of overlap. So this is an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. A couple of ways that this is frequently comes about: if you have elements of your culture that have a specific moment of adulthood, so things like a bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah, a quinceañera, those sorts of things, those come up a lot in this essay. Other things that come up a lot, this is one where we get a lot of essays on the mission trip. You took a mission trip to X country and you did volunteer work, and that helped you understand the ways in which you are super grateful for what you have and those sorts of things. I will not tell you not to write about your mission trip experience. Lots of people have great mission volunteering trip experiences. What I will say is make sure that you are not tokenizing the people that you were helping in any way. A lot of times those essays come off as, I was able to help these people and they helped me learn the ways in which I am grateful for my circumstances. And it doesn't actually focus a lot on the people you are helping. right? So do think about that. And also think about that new understanding of yourself. It's not just enough to tell me that you're grateful for what you have now. What do you want to do with that now? How did that change what you think and what you do in your life? Give me a little bit more about how it's changed you, how it's made you the person you are, and why that's important to me. Again, why does this make me want to admit you, right? So the sixth prompt is, I would say, very interesting in that a topic that makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? This is a fairly difficult one, I would say, to write and to write well, mostly because it's a little bit difficult to write about why a subject is interesting to you in a way that makes sense to others. Again, it's a very internal thought process. The other thing is, very rarely do people who answer this prompt actually answer all parts of it. Because if what you turn to, a common example of this is people will talk about writing. I love creative writing, and being able to work on poetry lets me lose all track of time, and it's great stress relief and all of these sorts of things. But almost never does that answer the question, what or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? Because it's difficult, right? The way you learn more about writing is by practicing and by reading and that sort of thing. And so it's a little bit difficult to answer that question in a way that makes sense in the story you're telling. But there are definitely good ways to do this prompt. Make sure you answer all of the parts of the question, as I already said, but also think a little bit more specifically. Don't think about it broadly in terms of writing is what makes me lose all track of time, or, you know, the focusing on cheerleading is what makes me lose all track of time. Really dig in. So I had a student this year who wrote an excellent essay about K-pop. I'm not super familiar with how K-pop works, but she gave me a great primer. She's interested in K-pop, not just in the music and the bands, but also in the way in which the industry works. And she gave me a really great primer of understanding how it works and how it made her interested in psychology, and the ways in which it applied. And that essay really stood out as one that was unique. I remember it. I remember nearly all of it. So think about focusing in. If you're going to write the writing essay, for example, what about writing do you like? Do you like writing fiction stories because you're interested in using your imagination? Do you like writing poetry because you're interested in the concept of liminal space? Whatever it is, focus it in a little bit more to a smaller subset of that topic. Okay. And then finally, Common App prompt number 7. So I'm going to reveal my full biases right now. I have real issues with Common App prompt number 7. And the reason why I have real issues with it is this prompt can be the absolute best of the essays that you get, and it is also the absolute worst of the essays that we get. There is no in between on this prompt. So in many ways, if it stopped after the first sentence, it would be fine. Share an essay on the topic of your choice, right? That just gives you a little bit more freedom on the Common App. If there's something you really want to write about, but it doesn't really fall into any of the other prompts, cool. You can say that you're using this prompt and write about whatever you want. It's the next part of it that makes it a little bit tricky. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. If you are thinking, awesome, I am very stressed right now. Senior year is stressful. I'm taking 3,000 AP classes, and I'm also in every extracurricular activity and sport the school offers. And I just want to make this a little faster. I've got an English paper I made an A on. I might as well use that. Please, please, please rethink. Do not do that. Let me tell you why this is not my favorite thing. Here's what we end up getting a lot of. If you want to click over to the next slide. Oh, next one. Yes, this is my fun X. Why not? This is what we get a lot of. About half of the people who do this actually leave my name, this class is English, this period, header at the top, somewhat helpful in that it gives me what I'm in for. And then they give me the essay, why vaccinations are important, a biography of Abraham Lincoln, whatever it is. Now, have I had fantastically well-written essays? Yes. Are they good college essays? Absolutely not. Because your biography of Abraham Lincoln does not tell me anything about you. If it's well written, it tells me you probably got an A in English, which I already knew by looking at your transcript. It does not tell me anything new. It doesn't give me any new information. It doesn't tell me why you should be admitted to my school. And it doesn't tell me something that I can latch on to if I have to argue for why you should be admitted. I can't say, oh, it's because they're super cool and they want to learn about this and they're really interested in this, because all I have is your biography of Abraham Lincoln. So there are good ways to do this prompt, okay? If you have something, if you're thinking about stories about yourself that don't fit into this. So for example, one of our student ambassadors took this essay and she really started talking about how she became interested in social justice in an unusual way, based on something that happened in her hometown, something that was small. She's from a really small town in North Carolina, that sort of thing, and how it really made her interested in being an advocate for certain groups, why she wants to go to law school, all of this sort of thing. That's a great way to address this prompt. Think about it in those terms. Do not think about it in terms of repurposing an essay from one of your classes. Please, I'm begging you. So I do want to talk about, I mentioned a couple of overused topics. So I've pulled some of my favorite ones together because I don't want to tell you, there are great ways to write about being an athlete. There are great ways to write about going on mission trips. But you just have to take it in a way that is very personal to you. We call it the backpack rule. If your essay, if you had it printed out and it fell out of your backpack, could one of your friends, your teachers, your counselors pick it up and know that it belonged to you because what you wrote was so personal to your story? So athletics, sports, dance, cheer taught me the value of hard work. A better way that one of our students wrote about it was she wrote about how being interested in basketball and helping her team get better by keeping track of their stats actually made her realize she wanted to be a math major and focus on statistics because of the data she collected. If you're thinking about writing about how much you love to read or how much you love to write, remember I said focusing it in. So one of our students wrote about what she really likes is the creativity. And that creativity is going to help her in the boardrooms and in future leadership roles. The importance of giving back during a mission trip. Think again about what you learned, how you're a new person now. So now I look at every interaction I have with someone experiencing homelessness completely differently. I want to focus on the overarching problem of affordable housing, right? And then one of my personal favorites, because we're a women's college, we get a lot of essays about I'm the person I am today because of my mom. I love those essays, but you have to tell me why. And one of our students wrote about how their mom made them confident in their Mexican-American identity because of her investment in tradition coupled with her involvement in local government. So you can see the ways in which people took topics that are written about frequently and really made them something super personal that told me a lot about them and who they are. So that's what I want you to be thinking about when you're thinking about college essays. All right, so a couple of things just to keep in mind. These are the things that we see less often. I already mentioned it, an essay no one else could write. If 100 people went to governor's school with you and you all write your essay about going to governor's school, I need to be able to pick yours out of the crowd and say, yes, this one belongs to whoever it is, because only you could have written that essay. Logical organization, I already mentioned, beginning, middle, end, strong conclusion, strong introduction. That is very important. I have hammered in strong conclusions, but that is the most important piece. A lot of times people run out of steam or they run out of words. They realize they're at 600 words and haven't concluded it. And so they type a couple of sentences and be done. Your conclusion's what people remember. And it should be the thing that really hammers into me the why I want you to be admitted to my college, why you're a cool student, what is interesting about the story that you've been telling. Um, Focus really hard on making sure that your conclusion and your introduction, whatever that is, I'm not saying it needs to be your typical research introduction where it's, you know, uh, this is my thesis sentence. But whatever your introduction is, it needs to set me into the story. And whatever your conclusion is, it needs to be something I remember. So keep those 2 points heavily in mind when you're a writer. All right, a couple of very basic things. I've already talked about some of these, but I'm just going to hit on them, some do's and don'ts. Be descriptive when telling your story. Show, don't tell. So don't just tell me that something was awesome to you. Show me why it was interesting. Give me those descriptive elements. That is important. Proofread. You will see my little joke in which I spelled proofread wrong multiple times. Proofread it, proofread it, proofread it. There is nothing wrong with getting somebody else to proofread it. Read it out loud, because a lot of times it only makes sense in your own head, but it doesn't make sense to other people. That happens to me all the time. And then if it helps you, think about the things you want your reader to walk away from. When I finish reading this essay, what are the 3 things you want me to know about you? Don'ts, I've already mentioned this. Don't rehash the things that are already on your application. Don't try to shock or surprise me. I read thousands of applications every year. You will not manage it. It's not going to happen. Don't forget to answer the prompt. I mentioned this already. If the prompt has multiple questions in it, make sure you're answering all of those questions. Don't forget that you're trying to stick to whatever your goal is for the essay and your story. And please, please, please don't forget to proofread, as I already mentioned, and use paragraphs. Some of the hardest essays to do are the ones where it's just one big block of text and there's no organization and no way to tell where you stop with one point and start on another point. So please use paragraphs. That is going to help you so much when you're writing. All right, and I'm just going to quickly breeze through this. Please take a screenshot of this, or there'll be a recording later that you can come back to. This is going to be a brainstorming exercise just to get you thinking if you're trying to figure out what are things you could write your essay about. So this is my 3-list exercise. So you're going to make 3 lists, and in the first list, you're going to write down some objects, things that are important to you, whether that is, your stuffed frog that your mom got you from her trip to Costa Rica, or your favorite food, or whatever it is. Write down some objects, things that mean a lot to you. In the second list, I want you to think about values, personality traits, things like that. Specifically, things that are important to you and that you think your college should share. So obviously some of the obvious ones are things like honesty, integrity. Go beyond that. You have a great sense of humor and you want your college to also have that. You are really compassionate and you want your college to also be compassionate. Think about those sorts of things. And then in list 3, put some facts. Maybe they're the kind of facts that you would include in like a getting to know you, icebreaker activity. So things like I have a twin brother, or I'm 6 feet tall, or my personal favorite, my icebreaker is always, I'm incredibly scared and have a phobia of chickens. Write down those facts. And then what you're going to do is look at your 3 list and start thinking about stories connected to those or ways in which things can be connected. So for example, I mentioned the one about someone who's 6 feet tall, listing that as a fact. That student turned that fact into an essay about how they'd always been, really self-confident, or really not confident about how tall they were, how hard it was to find shoes, how hard it was to find pants, all of these sorts of things, and then turned it into their growth over time and growing in their own self-confidence. So think about the things you've written down, the kinds of stories that you can attach to each of those things. All right. I've talked a lot. I've given you a lot of information. I think that is the end of my piece. So please, I'm going to be on here for the rest of the time. Drop some questions into the chat for me, and we'll also, I think, maybe answer some questions at the end. So.
Thank you, Ms. West. That was fantastic information. Students, hopefully you guys learned a lot of really good insight into the essay process. And I love this brainstorming exercise because I think that that's really going to give you guys some good tools to start creating these these essays for yourself. So it's good to start early. That's why we're doing these college jumpstart sessions, is so you can start thinking about how to make awesome essays. So what we're going to jump into now, we're actually going to shift gears here and start talking about resumes. And also after resumes, we're going to talk about letters of recommendation. And y'all, I've got some great information to share with you about letters of recommendation. So hang out to the end. And the resume stuff is good too. So again, I'm Mrs. Hamrick, one of the counselors here. So here we go. Let's talk about resumes. So a lot of people want to know, I mean, if you have never made a resume, let's just start with the very, very basics of what is a resume. Quite simply, the way that I like to describe a resume is that it is a transcript of your high school activities and accomplishments. So you have a history of the classes that you have taken over the time you've been in high school, which shows your grades, your classes. This is a transcript of those other things that you've been involved in. It is going to give a listing of those different types of things that make up who you are, and things that you've done in addition to your classes. So why in the world would you need one? Well, sometimes it's really good to have a way to share the highlights of these activities you've been involved in, your strengths, your accomplishments. It puts it all on one page, and it gives somebody a good picture of who you are in addition to those grades. When should you make a resume? Yesterday. And I say this kind of tongue in cheek because a resume is one of those things that the longer you go without updating and making a resume, the more content you have to put on it. And this is one reason that I really wanted to make sure that the resume talk was part of our college jumpstart, is because if you go ahead and start working on the resume now, you're going to thank yourself your senior year, because resumes can be kind of tedious. They can take a long time. Sometimes you have to think back to 9th grade year, what kind of things was I doing back then? Am I making sure that I'm adding everything in? So it gives you plenty of time to make sure you get all of those details in there. And it also is a lot easier to do if you start early and add to. So let's say you're adding some activities this year or maybe over the summer. If you've already created a resume that's up to date, then all you have to do for the summer or next fall, you just add the next sections on there. So I say yesterday, but really, if you haven't made a resume, now's a great time to start. But the earlier you can do that, and the more you can update it every time you add something new or get a new award or get a new job, that's the best way to keep up with a resume. And this is going to be true your entire life. A resume is something that you should always have up to date, because as you go out and start getting jobs, this is something that you will have to present to employers, which goes to who will want to see a resume. So colleges, employers, people who want to interview you, they're going to want to see a resume. Your teachers, your counselors, internship placements, and more. So anybody who's trying to make a decision about you or learn more about you, a resume is a really, really good tool to give to them so that they know more about you. And can see just the things that make you tick and the things that you're very interested in and the accomplishments that you've won. So this is just a quick screenshot of a resume that I found that I thought was just a good illustration. Now pretend this is all one page. I split it up into two so that you could see the different sections a little bit better. Now there are many, many, many versions of resumes out there and lots of different formats and ways to create a resume. This was just a good one that I thought was good. So I'm just going to go through a few points on a resume. So you need to make sure you have your full legal name on the resume. Your contact information, make sure you have good, solid contact information. That's a pretty standard thing to have. Make sure that phone number is one that you actually will answer and use. Okay. A professional email address. Okay. If you do not have a professional email address, you need to make a professional email address, one that has your name, first name dot last name, first name, last name with a number at the end, something that is not, sexy mama 69. Okay. Hopefully you guys have already created something that is is professional. And I think that a lot of you have gotten that message. By the way, the email address that you guys use, the students.cobk12.org email address that you oftentimes will use with your teachers, you probably already know this, but just a reminder, that is not an email address that you can use outside of the Cobb County system. So do not use that one on a regular basis. I would not put that one here. Get yourself a good Gmail account, whatever provider you want to use, but have that and let that be your professional email address that you use for professional things. Don't sign up for coupons and mailing lists and things unless it's in a professional manner, because you want to try to keep one that's clean, that doesn't get a lot of spam. Okay, an objective or a summary. A lot of times a resume will have a description of what the purpose of this resume is for. Why do you even have this resume? So you can just sort of see an example of what this particular student has listed. There are a lot of ways to write an objective on a resume. So what I would encourage you to do is think about how you can summarize who you are in a few sentences. Don't make this like a giant paragraph. This one's actually probably a little long. But this person kind of describes themselves: an enthusiastic student, social media professional, seeking to energize Pfizer College's student body with proven leadership skills, founded and ran a social fundraising organization that raised $27,000 for childhood cancer, varsity track team captain with an A+ average in English and physics. So it kind of summarizes the stuff that's on the resume, and gives whoever is reading it, Pfizer College, reasons that they should give this student a second look. So when you're going for a job, you're going to craft it for a potential employer. Why do you want to work for that particular company? And I would say Google, examples to get ideas about how you could word this. I think that's a great idea, a great way to see what kind of objective, how to word an objective. So within the body of the resume, you're going to give brief details about your activities and accomplishments. Don't just say, that you were the Drop the Elbow on Cancer founder operator, but what exactly did you do? Why is it important? What in the world is Drop the Elbow on Cancer? What is that? People who read a resume aren't automatically going to know what that is. If you are president of FLOP here at Pope High School, don't say president of FLOP and then not say what that is. Nobody outside of Pope High School knows what FLOP is, Foreign Languages of Pope. You got to spell things out. Don't put abbreviations that are going to be particular to just that particular school. Explain what that is. Say the accomplishments that you've had while you've been a part of that organization. I find that a lot of students don't automatically think to talk about what they've done as part of that organization. And that's kind of stuff you want to brag about. So you can see examples of this particular person and the stuff that they added into this resume, so that people really understand just why that's a really good accomplishment and just how cool they are for what they've done. List your role, positions held, the length of commitment. That gives insight into your depth of involvement. You can also add unique information that you didn't include in essays, or there's no other place to really add that. You can put that in the interest section, or that could be a skill you can see over on the side. This particular resume I thought was kind of cool. Has little dots to show just kind of their proficiency in a particular skill. And that's just a formatting thing. You don't have to do that, but this particular resume had that set up. I'm sure there's a template that does that. You don't have to do it that way, but just an example. White space, guys, don't fill a resume up with so much content. And I would, my colleagues would say that I would probably be guilty of needing to put more white space in, because I say a lot of stuff and I like to put a lot of words onto paper, but really try to add white space. Make sure that it's not so filled up with stuff that it's hard to really drill down to the most important information. And also, we do recommend that resumes stick to one page. If you start adding and it becomes more than one page, then people want to look at it. They want to see it all on one page and be able to move on. When it becomes more pages, then people get tired of looking at it and they may not pay attention to the most important thing. They may skim over something that you think is really important, or it just becomes words on a page and it's not interesting to them anymore. So try very hard to stick to one page. Okay, so I do want to make sure that you guys all understand that you don't have to necessarily format all this by yourself. Navient has a fantastic resume builder, and I'm not going to go and show you that, but I've got some screenshots to show you how to find it. It's not hard to find. In Navient, go to About Me, do the drop down, and click on Home. And then there at the top of the page right here, where you can see underneath your name is a little link for a resume. So if you click on that, you can go through the resume builder process, and it will give you a form you can fill out for each of the sections. So you can just see I sort of created a fake student here. I am Junior Hamrick. And so you can see I put an objective here. I put some work experience, education, volunteer service, awards, skills, academic achievement. That repeats some of that stuff, music achievement, athletic achievement, that kind of thing. So basically what happens when you pull yours up, it's going to be a blank screen, and you're going to click on this little pink X up here at the top, and it's going to give you a drop down of all the sections you can put onto a resume. So you don't have to put every single one of those sections on a resume, just pick the ones that apply to you, okay? The cool thing is that once you've created this resume, number one, counselors and teachers can see this automatically in Navient. You don't have to share it with this. You don't have to do anything special if you build it in Navient. Basically, when you click those little pink drop downs, these are the kind of boxes you can fill in. This is just an example of what it looks like. So it's really makes it really easy. And then when you are ready to print it, let's say you did want to send it to somebody else outside of Pope High School, somebody who doesn't have access to that Navient, you can print or export that resume. And it actually has 3 different formats that you can pick from. So I have saved a few resumes here. You can edit it. Go back to that page you were just at. You can download it as a PDF. You can download it into Word. Let's say you really don't like the format of what they've created and you want to reformat it and use different fonts, whatever. You can download it to Word and format it yourself. Okay. And then if you don't like it, you can remove it if you're done with that one. Okay. So resume, go ahead and get started on that. That is a great homework assignment for you guys. Just pull it up and maybe commit to adding 1 new activity every day or updating 1 section every day. And before you know it, you will have a resume ready to go, and it will be something you can share senior year or even now if you're trying to get a job or whatever, for whatever reason that you might want a resume. Okay, so that's kind of a good summary and kind of a kickstart, hopefully, to get you guys going with resumes. So let's talk about letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation are, Miss West was talking before about how, the essay is something that you have complete control over. Letters of recommendation, really the control that you have is your attitude, behavior, your interactions with those people who might write recommendation letters for you, and then who you ask to write those letters of recommendation. So a lot goes into, kind of building those relationships and then making those requests. But once you've made that request, it's out of your hands. Okay. So it's really important to make sure that you do that front work to make sure that you are able to get some good letters of recommendation. So letters of recommendation types that you're going to probably encounter, those are the most common. And remember that not every college needs recommendation letters. But you are, more competitive colleges are likely going to ask for teacher recommendation letters. A lot of them are going to need a recommendation from your counselor. So one of the 5 counselors, whichever one you're assigned to, we will be helping you with those. We'll give you some specifics about how that's going to work. And then sometimes they want a personal reference or someone not in the school or someone from a non-academic perspective. So let's talk about teacher recommendations. So I like to think of these as a Google Street View. This is the more boots on the ground, detailed information that the college is going to learn about from you. So teacher recommendations are going to provide those day-to-day interactions. They're going to be able to talk about, what was the student like in the classroom? What anecdotes can they provide about interactions that they've had? Is there a funny story, or is there a really good example of how that student behaved in the class that really just, stuck with that teacher? What was the student's classroom behaviors, their work ethic, their participation? All of these things are going to go into whether a teacher is a good recommender or not. So you're going to want to target 1 to 3 academic teachers. So That's something that colleges typically are going to want to hear from. They're going to want to hear from those specific English, math, science, social studies, foreign language teachers, because really most colleges are assessing students for admission based on those 5 subjects. Now, the other subjects are certainly valid as well. Don't get me wrong, but you will find that some colleges are going to specify those are the subject teachers that they want to hear from. And so you need to make sure that you follow directions. Okay, if a college asks for academic teacher recommendation letters, that's who you're going to want to ask. Often they want you to get letters from a teacher who has taught you recently, so 11th or 12th grade. So you're still working on relationships with teachers this year, so you've got time to think about who you have had, what teachers you're interacting with now, who might be good recommenders for you. And these need to be teachers who can describe you well. All right, so let's talk about things to think about. So if you're thinking of a teacher for a recommendation, think about how you interact and participate in the class. Are you doing that? Do you complete your work regularly and on time? Do you attend class regularly or on time? Do you sit there and type on your phone and ignore them, or do you have headphones in? Do you ask for help when you don't understand something, or do you just kind of depend on, yourself, or continue to let things slide and not actually seek out help? Do you turn your camera on when you're remote? Guys, this is important. And I think that, your teachers will say, hey, you guys turn on the cameras. I want to hear from you. I will tell you, teachers very much are wanting to hear directly from their students this year. And one thing that I think is a challenge for you guys, and I know it can be awkward, but teachers know and pay attention to those kids who are interacting the most. I mean, these are especially in this year with COVID, keeping that camera off when they really want to hear from you and interact, it can be hard for them. So those students who are taking those efforts and really working hard to make those connections with those teachers, it really is making a difference. I talk to teachers all the time, and they say that they don't know who their students are. They wouldn't know them if they saw them in the hall because they haven't had those interactions with them. It's hard for a teacher to write a recommendation letter without having had that. And I think COVID is making that more challenging. So it's up to you guys to try to find ways to make those connections with those teachers. Okay. Do you interact with your peers? What are those conversations like in class when you guys are having a discussion? Do you respect the comments of others? Do you build off their comments? Are you courteous to other people? So they're looking at that. They see those conversations that you are having in class before class starts. They see, are you the one that's always helpful to other people, or do you only looking out for yourself? So teachers notice more than you realize. Okay, so think about what kind of message you're sending to teachers by those kind of interactions in the classroom. They see you in the halls too. They see you in the fields. They see you in other contexts as well. So the counselor recommendation, this is kind of the Google Earth view. We counselors write recommendations from more of a broad perspective. We, of course, don't know all of our students, which is so unfortunate. And we love to get to know you guys. And the ones that we do get to know, we can write better recommendation letters for. But we all are going to want 3 things from students so that we can write a good letter of recommendation. So that resume that I just got finished talking to you about, we all want you to give us a copy of a resume. We all are going to want you guys to fill out something called the self-assessment, which is in Naviance and About Me in surveys. So you could actually look at that and start filling out some of those questions now. And there's an optional parent assessment. And we really do like those. It says optional, but it's something that we would highly encourage you to get your parents to do. But it's also in the parent Naviance account and About Me in surveys. So what we do is we take those 3 things and we write letters about all those questions that we ask you about. We like to talk about the extras in your life and like to give a broader context of who you are, outside of the school, or maybe some information about who you are within school, but maybe a different perspective than what teachers can give. What has shaped you? What are your passions and goals? What are you hoping to accomplish one day? What life experiences or stories have molded you? It's always good to be able to reference a story that kind of illustrates who you are. One of the questions in the self-assessment is for you to list words that describe you, those great adjectives that really talk about who you are, or describe who you are. Events that have happened that we can relate or elaborate on, that we can just sort of discuss and describe. Struggles you've overcome. This may or may not be something you want us to talk about, but sometimes it can be helpful to provide some context. Again, let's say you were sick sophomore year, you had mono, you were out for 6 weeks, that impacted your grades. That's something that we can talk about. And then sometimes counselors, one of the things that we sometimes may do, we may not need to provide a letter. Sometimes we just need to fill out a form for you. You might see something called the secondary school report. Common App has this, but that's a report that just gives some details about you, and it may or may not require a letter. So that's a little bit of information about the council recommendation. Just a point about these two topics is this is something we will talk about more during senior year. Just by the way, I'm not going into the details about how to actually make these requests yet, because that feature has not been turned on for you in the Navient account, in your Navient account as juniors. We will give you more details about how to actually go about making those official requests later, but it's tied into actually completing your college applications, and there's a process that we want you to go through. But for now, what I want you to understand is thinking about who could be good recommenders for you, and then how that process is going to play out, and how to prepare for that. So sometimes colleges or scholarship organizations may accept recommendations from other services, such or other places like a coach, club sponsor, community member, employer. Sometimes you can provide letters of recommendation from those arenas as well. They're not as commonly requested by colleges, but sometimes it can be like a third recommendation letter that could be submitted, or it just depends on the college. Some are more open to this type of recommendation than others, but just make sure you're reading what the criteria are for that particular college to know exactly what you need to provide, and what kind of recommendation letter. So you'll see this more often with scholarships, but they can also, these types of recommendations can also provide some really good information and context about you. So recommendations for recommendations. I've got a lot of good information here, and also some direct quotes and things from your teachers. So this is where there's a lot of words here. So this presentation will be posted on the counselor webpage in the junior section, so you can look at this stuff later. But make sure you are only requesting letters of recommendation from colleges that want them. Guys, follow directions. Do not request letters from a teacher or a counselor if the college is not going to be looking at them. Number one, it wastes a lot of people's time, and you don't want to do that. And number two, the college, if they're not even going to read it and throw it away, then it's a waste, and you're not following directions. Some colleges look at that, so make sure you know whether the college wants that recommendation letter or not. Make sure you are giving the person who's writing this letter plenty of time. Do not come up to them, the day before and say, hey, would you write a recommendation letter for me? Guys, it takes people a long time to write letters. It can take me 30 minutes to an hour to compose a good, solid recommendation letter for somebody. And for other people, it's the same. We spend a lot of time on these, and it's very difficult to do a letter at the drop of a hat, asked at the last minute. So at least a month, if not more. You could even start talking to some of your teachers now, and asking them if they would be willing to write a letter of recommendation for you for next year. You won't make the official request until next year, again, because you do that through Navient, but you could go ahead and start talking to them about that. But I can't emphasize that enough, and the teachers say this all the time, that the time piece is so important. Ask in person. Don't just send them the request through Navient and then expect that they're going to do them. Teachers want you to ask them directly, okay? And they want to know that you want them to do a recommendation for UGA, for Georgia Tech, for Agnes Scott, and ask in person. If you can't ask in person, send an email. Make sure it's very professional. Make sure it gives them a lot of details of what they need to know to be able to do the recommendation letter. And if you ask in person, I would follow up with an email just summarizing everything and say, say, thank you so much for being willing to do this recommendation letter for me. Here's the details. I'm applying to this college with this deadline. And also I think it's always a good idea to remind them of things that you found enjoyable about the class. Maybe tell them about an anecdote that you remember that really stood out to you, because it can actually help prompt them with things to write about. Maybe, it might have been a year or two since they last taught you, and it could give them some fodder to build the letter off of. So that's always a good thing. Make sure you provide a resume or a brag sheet. Some teachers have their own brag sheet they want you to fill out. So again, asking early enough gives them time to give you that and gives you time to fill it out and get it back to them as quickly as possible. But again, that resume, you're hearing this a lot, right? Make sure that the teacher knows you well, someone who can compile the information well, like your counselor. Make sure you write a thank you note at the end. Okay, make sure you let them know how grateful you are. I didn't say this earlier, but teachers are not required to write a letter of recommendation for you. Sometimes you might hear the word no. You might have a teacher say, you know what, I'm not sure that I'm able to write a letter. It might be better to ask somebody else. You might hear that, you may not. But being grateful to them is so important. And that lost start of writing a thank you note, please do that. Let your recommender know the results of the colleges you're applying to or the scholarship that you've applied to. We always love to know, did you get in? Did you get a scholarship? Tell the person that wrote your letter of recommendation so that we know what the result is. A lot of times, we write the letter and then we never hear back. So make sure you let us know, because we want to help celebrate you in that as well. Here's one that is always tricky. Do not expect or ask to get a copy of the letter. Okay. Letters of recommendation are almost always confidential. Okay. And that's including for you. And there's a lot of reasons that go behind that. A lot of that is because that colleges want to be able to trust that the information that the recommender has given is fully accurate, and there's no possible influence that the person asking for the recommendation could have. So it's important to make sure that you're trusting that the writer has your best interest at heart. So please make sure that when you're asking this person to write the recommendation letter, that you trust them and give them that trust. But you will find that some teachers may give you a copy of that letter. That's totally up to them. If they want to do that, that's fine. But you'll find that a lot of people do not. And it's not because anybody's trying to hide anything from you. But number one, our counseling office, it's our policy. We don't provide those letters of recommendation because, we can't, we don't want to get in the habit of doing that for some and not others. But again, we'll talk more about this senior year, but ultimately it's so that letter of recommendation is really a true representation of what that person has experienced with you. So just keep that in mind, okay? So this next section, I've got a few slides, and I know that we are going over time, but I think that this information is really helpful. I actually posed a question to our teachers here at Pope and asked them, what are recommendations that you have for students about approaching the requesting teacher recommendations? So I'm just going to go through these quickly. And I might not read every single little thing. And like I said, I'm going to put this onto the page so you can go through and read these in greater detail. But this first one, have students notify when they add schools in Navient. So again, this is going to be senior year. You're going to hear some of these quotes again, because we're going to put these into the senior presentation. But every time that you request, you need a teacher to write a new recommendation letter for you, you need to let them know. You need to ask them, okay? Don't just assume that they're going to go in there and see it and, oh, I need to send this letter of recommendation. But make sure that for every single college, you have a conversation with them so that they know that you need to that you need for them to submit a letter on their behalf. Okay, they don't always go into Naviance and look. Okay, that's something that will become more relevant to you senior year. Make sure that you are staying up to date and completing your information on time, because a lot of times teachers can't submit stuff until you've completed your part. Make sure you do that. Time. I think I think they think they're giving a sample time, but often it's not much. Again, at least a month, if not more. Okay, don't think that coming in a week before even is sufficient. You don't know what else this teacher has on their plate, or the counselor. Okay, counselors, we would ask you this as well. Give details about the scholarship or the college requirements, give them a resume, give them time. This is very good. Students who ask for recs need to have a good and respectful, need to have been good and respectful in class, have done their work regularly, stayed off their phones and bold, fulfilled their promises, have good attendance. This doesn't mean straight A's. This means you are someone who is worthy of my respect. Okay. The teacher wants to have a good impression of you. Treat every day in class like it's an ongoing job interview. If you can't keep yourself screwed down and do the important stuff on a regular basis, I have no enthusiasm for lying to someone about what a superstar you are. That one's kind of blunt, but think about that. The teachers that you're hoping to write a letter of recommendation, they note these interactions. When students ask for recommendations, they have no idea what the teachers are actually sending in for them. Therefore, a recommendation is not just a piece of paper. It is a teacher's affirmation that you are someone who is worthy of future trust. I'm going to reemphasize to ask. Another teacher says this. I will not touch those until I am asked. Okay, make sure you are asking for that recommendation letter. The resume is very important. They don't always know what you've been involved in. Don't assume that we always know that you are, the star pitcher on the softball team. Don't assume we know that. Make sure you give us that information. It gives us good context for what you've been involved in. We are asked about academic promise. Us liking the personality of the student does not automatically mean the recommendation will be stellar. Not always if they're a good kid, but are they a good student? That's what the teacher is talking about, is what kind of a student are you? Because that's what the college wants to know. Are you going to be a good student? One of the things I consider is, had or did the student exhibit qualities that would make them successful in higher education? Things like academic initiative, thinking for themselves, low on excuse making. Academic integrity is very important. That is something that colleges want to know about. They need to let us know if they add a school in Navient. So that's like the third time we've heard that one, right? Can't speak for other teachers, but I don't open Navients every day just for kicks. Lastly, I try to personalize recommendations every time. The more I know about what they're applying for, the better the letter can be. And then finally, I'm trying to go through these quick. Along the lines of a resume, ask students to tell me about an activity they did or something they learned in the class that had a lasting impact on them. I kind of mentioned that before. That's a really good thing to add. It helps to jog the memory for the teacher for the letter. Most recommendation letters want to know how the student performed on an activity. Next one, I think it's important to know that our recommendation is not simply a rubber stamp, and that the way they act in class is exactly what is going on the recommendation. Think about your actions in class. What is your likely course of study? That's something that teachers like to know about. It gives the teacher a chance to highlight those attributes, skills, and activities. And it can have a greater impact on the recommendation letter. Here's another one, re-emphasizing the importance of asking. Okay, right? Requesting the recommendation is an important part of the process. And then lastly, and I did kind of mention this before, it is not our duty to write letters or give recommendation letters for students who ask. They are asking us to vouch for their academic promise, character, and integrity. We are putting our name on the document and will not lie for the kids. I'm so happy to help kids, and most of ours are deserving, but we look at the whole child. Have they earned a recommendation on their own merit? This starts day one of class. I'm willing to run through walls for the kids who have earned it. So those are just some comments from Pope teachers today who gave me these comments. So remember this information. I think this is super important, and we'll continue if we get more comments to add to this list of things. So that was a lot of information, guys, and I thank you for those of you who've hung in there with me. We will be posting the recording of this. If you have questions, type them into the chat. We're going to compile an FAQ. Like I said, if you want to email any of us, of course, Miss West, she is open to you emailing her directly. There's her email address on the screen. And of course, we counselors are available to help answer questions for you as well. So make sure that you are reaching out to us. Ms. Stone's giving a little dance. And then I do want to advertise, we do have 2 more college jumpstart sessions, April 16th after spring break. We are going to be talking about money. Not everybody's favorite topic, but we're going to do kind of a brush up on the basics and scholarship searching, because I know a lot of kids are interested in that. And then last is going to be a Q&A for things that we haven't covered. The first two sessions have already happened, and I'm looking at possibly, redoing those or making sure that I post a video of those two. We didn't have good turnout at those, and so there isn't a lot. I don't have recordings, but I'm looking at doing that. And then, so if you have Q&A or questions that we haven't answered, that one's going to kind of be a free-for-all. So guys, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. I'm super excited about the turnout today. And like I said, let us know what questions you have, and we're happy to help. So thank you so much.
Hey, Ms. Hamrick, if anyone's still here, there is one student asked a question. Is it okay if we ask teachers from sophomore year if we were able to make better relationships with those teachers due to the impact of COVID if they're a junior this year? So I typed in, I said, yeah, you could do that. Make sure you have that conversation. What are your thoughts about that, Rachel?
Yeah, we would totally accept that. Right now is a difficult time. We know that things are difficult, especially with making those connections if you're in a virtual setting. So we will definitely accept them from sophomore year. I also think a lot of times, like, we'll accept extras. So we require one from, a teacher from your junior or senior year, that sort of thing. You can also send an extra. So if you have one teacher from that and then one teacher from your sophomore year, or a coach or an art teacher, or whatever it is, that's totally fine too. So
that sounds excellent. And I think I mean, I can't speak for other colleges, but just knowing the conversations and the counselor events for that college representatives have been at that I've attended, I would hear similar kinds of things. I think that a lot of colleges would definitely take that into account because this is such a strange year with COVID. It definitely impacts things. And if you haven't been able to have the same interactions with those teachers, that totally makes a lot of sense to me. So, yep. So were there any other questions, Ms. Shearstone, or was that?
No, that was it. And I just told the students that they need to be sure just to be like Rachel was saying, follow the instructions. So if they want a teacher rec from junior or senior year, make sure you do send one. But if you have, a question or concern and you want to make sure it's okay to send that sophomore teachers, just double check. We can ask us, but it's always really best to go straight to the resource, email that admissions office and ask them if they would be okay with that.
Fantastic. I think the big lesson is when in doubt, ask, right?
Yep.
Ask the question, because that you can always find an answer just by either asking us, asking the admissions rep. Really, the admissions rep is the best person to ask if it's a college specific question. But if you ask counselor and we're not super sure, we can help direct you and get you connected with that person. So, all right. Well, thank you guys. You guys have a fantastic day. Stay dry since it's been raining today. Hopefully everybody stays safe, but have a good rest of your Wednesday.